Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. She was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by canine dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." The police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather, but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her, as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said, "His behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved." A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down. So she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. "As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't." When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex, like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jamie said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jamie's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Jamie's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dana Ireland. Dana Marie Ireland was born on December 12, 1968, in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to John Ireland and Mary Louise Crank. She was the youngest daughter, with an older sister, Sandra, who was 7 years her senior. In 1991, when Dana was 23, she visited her sister in Hawaii with her parents. On December 24, Dana borrowed her sister's bike for a ride. However, she never returned. Her bike, shoe, and a clump of hair were later found on the side of the road, but Dana was nowhere to be seen. The condition of the bike suggested that Dana had been struck by a vehicle. The impact was severe, causing significant damage to the bike's wheels and steering wheel. Unfortunately, hopes that the driver who hit Dana had taken her to the hospital were short-lived. Tragically, Dana was found 5 miles from where her bike was discovered. She had suffered severe injuries to her body and head, and her lower body was exposed. The evidence suggested that Dana had not only been hit by a car but had also been taken advantage of while she was vulnerable. Nurse Jerry Gallagher is haunted by a traumatic event that occurred on Christmas Eve 1991. A friend, Brian, arrived at her home on Satellite Road in a rural area 25 miles southeast of Hilo. He had found Dana Ireland, severely injured and in need of medical attention. Gallagher, who was licensed to provide care, accompanied Brian to the scene, just a mile from her house. Upon arrival, she found Dana lying on the ground, naked from the waist down, with severe bruises on the inner sides of her legs. Gallagher attempted to administer first aid using a kit, but Dana's most critical injury was a severe head wound on the back of her skull. When Gallagher inquired about her identity, Dana's response was incoherent, seeming to utter the words, "is land." Gallagher then asked who was responsible for her condition, but Dana's answers remained unclear. Dana did, however, repeatedly request Gallagher to return her keys so she could drive home. Gallagher made an effort to keep her awake while awaiting further assistance. Due to the area's lack of phone services, significant delays occurred before an ambulance finally arrived more than 2 hours after the initial call for help. Moreover, further complications arose when the emergency services dispatcher mistakenly relayed the wrong location for the incident. These factors collectively resulted in an additional 34-minute delay for Dana to receive the medical attention she required. Gallagher had considered driving Dana to the hospital himself, but she was worried that moving her could cause further injury. She has since struggled with the decision and the fact that it took so long for help to arrive. An ambulance finally brought Dana to Hilo Hospital at 7:56 p.m. Unbeknownst to her parents, John and Mary Louise, who were searching for her, Dana was the injured woman being treated at the hospital. They had found her damaged bicycle by the side of the road and were trying to locate her. At the time, Mary thought someone had hit Dana and taken her to the hospital. John stayed near the bike while Mary and their eldest daughter Sandra went to the hospital to look for Dana. When the ambulance arrived with Dana, Mary and Sandra were already there. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save Dana. She was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. due to severe injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident, including blood loss and trauma to her head, pelvis, and abdomen. Dana's family was shocked by her death, which permanently altered their lives. As time passed, they would face another challenge, a long and arduous search for suspects and subsequent trials. The police investigation was described by local newspapers as intense. They discovered a T-shirt at the crime scene that belonged to the perpetrator. They also seized a sheet from the hospital with semen stains on it, which was crucial evidence since Dana had semen on her body when she was admitted. Furthermore, a bite mark on Dana's body matched the teeth print of her attacker. The authorities obtained a DNA sample from the perpetrator, but this was of limited use in 1991. The tire tracks from the bike and the secluded area where it was found provided few leads. Despite interviewing residents, the investigators could not find any witnesses who saw the car that hit Dana's bike, likely due to the remote location and poor road conditions, which deterred cars from traveling there frequently. The investigation into the Dana Ireland case had reached a dead end due to a lack of witnesses and evidence. However, a breakthrough occurred when John Gonzalez contacted the Hawaii County Police in May 1994. Gonzalez was involved in a high-profile case involving illegal substances, but he received a suspended sentence due to his cooperation with the police. Gonzalez revealed that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had important information about the Dana Ireland case. Frank Pauline stated that brothers Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer were involved in the attack on Dana Ireland. The Schweitzer family lived next door to the Frank Pauline family, and their families did not get along. According to Frank Pauline, he was present when the Schweitzers attacked Dana Ireland. They allegedly ran her over, put her in the trunk, and took her to another location. Based on Frank Pauline's statements, the police made Albert Schweitzer, Sean Schweitzer, and Frank Pauline the main suspects in the case. Frank Pauline Jr. was born on April 27, 1973, in Fremont, California, to Frank Sr. and Patricia Pauline. He grew up in Puna, Hawaii, where he became a father of 3 sons by the age of 20. However, Frank had a history of run-ins with the law, starting at the age of 9. By February 8, 1983, Frank Pauline had been caught in a burglary. As he got older, the severity of his crimes increased. In February 1994, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for harassment and robbery. Despite this, Pauline continued to commit crimes, earning him the nickname "Walking Crime Wave" from prosecutors. After being sentenced, Pauline was taken into custody to start his prison term. However, he managed to escape and was classified as a fugitive. He was eventually recaptured in Honolulu a few days later. 3 months after Pauline received a 10-year sentence, his brother John Gonzalez contacted the authorities and provided information about the Dana Ireland case. Pauline and Gonzalez decided to cooperate with the investigation, which could potentially reduce Pauline's sentence. John Gonzalez was initially a questionable source of information, but after speaking with investigators, the case against him for illegal substances was closed, and he received a suspended sentence. Pauline claimed to have information about the Dana Ireland case and was interrogated by investigators from the Big Island. The 90-minute interrogation took place in Honolulu, where Pauline was in custody. During the interrogation, Pauline provided details about the attack on Dana Ireland and reconstructed the crime scene on the Big Island, showing detectives the locations he mentioned earlier. Pauline told detectives that on December 24, 1991, brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzer picked him up at his home in a purple Volkswagen Beetle. Albert Ian was driving. Before they saw a woman on the side of the road, they stopped to take illegal substances. As they approached an intersection near Kapaho, they saw she standing on the side of the road. Pauline recalled Albert Ian pointing her out, saying, "Look at that girl," but they initially continued driving. Albert Ian then suggested turning the car around so he could talk to she. As they drove back, traveling at 40 to 45 miles per hour, Albert Ian failed to stop in time and accidentally hit she, later identified as Dana Ireland. After hitting Dana, the trio got out of the car, loaded her into the trunk, and continued driving. A short distance later, they stopped and removed Dana from the car. Despite being injured, she was still alive. Pauline claimed he did not assault Dana, unlike the Schweitzer brothers. However, he said something that had severe consequences. According to Pauline, Albert Ian insisted that he find a tire iron and hit Dana on the head to end her suffering. Pauline's initial statement to the police was written down and he signed it, confirming that he testified voluntarily, without coercion, threats, or influence from substances. He was later moved to the Maui Community Correctional Center for protection due to threats from fellow inmates. However, 2 years later, Pauline retracted his statement, claiming he fabricated his story at his stepbrother's request to avoid jail. He admitted he was not present during the attack but had information about those responsible. Pauline explained that he lied about being there to make his information credible and to avoid being accused of perjury, but perjury was not one of the charges he faced. On July 30, 1997, Frank Pauline was charged with the murder of Dana Ireland after signing a confession claiming he had struck her with a tire iron. However, the confession raised suspicions, as when investigators took him to the Big Island, he was unable to identify the exact location of the crime or where Dana's body was found. This led investigators to question the truthfulness of Pauline's confession. Pauline eventually retracted his confession, fearing that if he continued to lie, he could be charged with perjury. His retraction was motivated in part by his realization that his half-brother, Albert Gonzalez, was innocent and being wrongly accused. In the end, Gonzalez was able to avoid major charges related to a separate crime, and in exchange, he agreed to testify against Pauline at his trial. At the time of the arrest, DNA testing technology was not as advanced as it is today. Despite this, the authorities collected DNA samples from Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. They also analyzed biological fluids from the gurney sheet used to transport Dana Ireland to the hospital and swabs from her body. However, the results were unexpected. The DNA of Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers did not match the DNA of the perpetrator. Although the charges against the three men were dropped, the investigation continued. The prosecution suggested that someone else must have been involved, as other evidence also failed to implicate Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. For example, the teeth of the Schweitzer brothers and Pauline did not match the bite mark found on the victim's chest. Furthermore, no traces of Dana Ireland's blood or hair were found in Albert Ian Schweitzer's Volkswagen, which he had acquired only a month after her death. External pressures, including those from the Dana Ireland family, the public, and the press, may have influenced the course of events in the investigation into Dana Ireland's death. Albert Ian Schweitzer was 20 years old at the time of Dana Ireland's murder and had only traffic-related infractions on his record. Sean Schweitzer, who was 16 when Dana Ireland died, received charges in connection with her death at the age of 23. Around that time, Sean also faced unrelated charges of fourth-degree assault for inappropriately touching a 15-year-old girl when he was 16. He received a sentence of 180 days in prison and 1 year of probation. Despite their records showing a pattern of questionable behavior, DNA testing cleared all three suspects involved in the Dana Ireland case of her murder. However, this finding was likely undermined by the unrelated convictions that surfaced in their pasts. 5 days after Frank Pauline's initial statement to the police, investigators searched the Schweitzer family home and seized Albert Ian's 1957 Volkswagen Beetle as evidence. Both Sean and Albert Ian claimed they were not with Frank Pauline on the night of the crime, although they admitted to knowing him. Sean stated that he was at home on Christmas Eve, while Albert Ian said he was either at home or at his uncle's house. Albert Ian also explained how he acquired his car, initially denying that he had done any bodywork on it. He revealed that the car was originally purple, but he repainted it yellow because it wasn't his preferred color. The Schweitzer brothers' lawyers believed that Frank Pauline had falsely accused them due to a long-standing feud between their families. Nevertheless, the prosecution continued to pursue the case. On May 5, 1999, just days before the statute of limitations expired for some of the crimes committed against Dana Ireland, the police received a statement from Michael Ortiz, a cellmate of the Schweitzers and an associate of Gonzalez. This new information was seen as a potential breakthrough in the case. During questioning by authorities, Michael Ortiz claimed that Albert Ian Schweitzer had confessed to his involvement in the crime. Based on this testimony, Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers were recharged in connection with Dana Ireland's death just 2 weeks later. This development raised suspicions and distrust among the public, as the information had come from a questionable source and had been revealed just days before the statute of limitations was set to expire. Frank Pauline was the first to face trial. The proceedings were highly emotional. Pauline professed his innocence, stating that he had lied when he initially confessed to being involved in Dana's murder. When taking the stand, Mary Ireland recounted receiving the devastating news about her daughter. She described the distressing scene: a bicycle on the road, a shoe, and a lock of hair. However, the witnesses who linked Pauline to the crime had checkered pasts and stood to gain from implicating him. Among those who benefited from Pauline being found guilty was his half-brother, Gonzalez, who became a witness for the prosecution. Witness William Chung, who also testified against Pauline, said Pauline confessed his involvement in this crime. However, when asked if he saw Pauline in the courtroom, he pointed to another person, although Frank Pauline was there. The jury also saw Dana Ireland's bike, shorts, top, underwear, and a Jimmy's t-shirt recovered from the scene. Not one of those items had DNA from Pauline or the Schweitzers. To get around the lack of scientific evidence, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida insisted that the Jimmy's t-shirt covered in Dana Ireland's blood belonged to Pauline. "We're not afraid of that evidence. We embrace it," Ashida said. Then, that same DNA technology works both ways for the defense and the prosecution. Pauline's lawyer protested, saying the t-shirt wasn't even Frank's size. Nevertheless, the jury found that the evidence and assumptions presented at the trial were enough to convict Pauline. Pauline's guilty verdict and 180-year sentence were handed down despite forensic evidence proving his confession was false. The next trial was that of Albert Ian Schweitzer, who knew about Pauline's sentence and was surprised when prosecutors offered him a plea deal, given the lack of physical evidence. Albert Ian Schweitzer rejected the offer, maintaining his innocence. The prosecutor claimed Schweitzer's Volkswagen Beetle was involved in the crime, but several facts contradicted this assertion. Witnesses in the area where Dana was found reported seeing a pickup truck, not the Beetle, and forensic analysis of Schweitzer's car turned up no evidence linking it to the crime. Furthermore, Schweitzer only became the official owner of the Volkswagen in January 1992. Albert Ian Schweitzer was sentenced to 130 years in prison based on the testimony of Michael Ortiz, who claimed Albert Ian had confessed to the crime, and evidence of scratches on Albert Ian's car bumper. After seeing his brother convicted, Sean Schweitzer initially wanted to prove his innocence but eventually decided to take a plea deal due to concerns about the justice system failing him again. As part of his agreement with the prosecutor's office, Sean Schweitzer was required to testify against his brother and Frank Pauline, who were accused of playing a role in Dana Ireland's death. He was also required to take a polygraph test to prove his honesty. The polygraph test was administered on March 24, 2000, by an examiner from the State Attorney General's office. However, the test results showed that Sean was not truthful about his involvement in the crime. Despite this, he was still allowed to plead guilty to the lesser charges of kidnapping and involuntary deprivation of life. There was a discrepancy in the court records regarding the polygraph test results. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida initially stated that Sean had failed the test, but later claimed that he had passed it. Sean was ultimately sentenced to 5 years probation, with credit for 18 months served. In an interview after his release, Sean stated that the decision to accept the plea deal was made by his family, who were concerned about the potential impact on his parents if both brothers were imprisoned. His brother, Albert Ian, who was later sentenced to 130 years in prison, recalled advising Sean to accept the deal to avoid serving life in prison, as imprisonment of both brothers might have been too stressful for their parents. Years later, Sean still feels remorseful for testifying against his brother and making a deal with the prosecutor. He and his family have struggled to move on from the case, and Sean has had a hard time finding a job due to the community's knowledge of the case. Community members made remarks about the case for years, causing Sean to experience disappointment and frustration. After being wrongfully convicted, Albert Ian Schweitzer and his family refused to give up the fight. In 2005, Albert Ian applied to the Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to re-examining convictions using new evidence and investigative techniques. The case eventually gained momentum in 2010 when students from the University of Hawaii, lawyers, and professors started re-investigating the old files from the Dana Ireland case. Local prosecutors authorized the investigation, which has spanned several years. Throughout this process, efforts continued to deliver the desired outcome, justice for Albert Ian. The goal was to rectify a miscarriage of justice and bring about restitution. The investigation's findings and the subsequent actions taken will bring truth and closure to the matter. Ultimately, the hope is that justice will prevail, and the issue will be laid to rest. Years passed and Mary Louise Ireland, Dana's mother, eventually passed away on her 92nd birthday in 2016. Meanwhile, Linda battled breast cancer, which made it difficult for her to visit her son, Albert Ian. When Linda finally had the chance to see Albert Ian for the very last time, she was heartbroken. During this emotionally charged visit, Albert Ian expressed a final wish to his mother. He didn't want her to leave him, and the thought of saying goodbye was unbearable. He had always found it hard to see the people he loved leave, especially after losing his grandmother. Albert Ian confided in his mother that it was his greatest fear, losing those closest to him, and that he never wanted to have to say goodbye to her again. A DNA expert, Nancy Dinh, testified at the trial after retesting evidence using advanced methods that were not available during the original trials. She explained that technology has improved significantly since 2000, allowing for the detection of details that were previously invisible. Contrary to the 2000 authorities' claim that Frank Pauline's and the Schweitzer brothers' DNA was not on the T-shirt due to excessive amounts of Dana Ireland's blood, scientists from the Innocence Project used modern technology to distinguish between Dana's DNA and other DNA on the T-shirt. They also found seminal fluid and sweat from the armpit on the T-shirt. Nancy Dinh confirmed that the DNA found on the T-shirt and Dana's body belonged to the same person. However, she stated that this person was neither Frank Pauline nor one of the Schweitzer brothers. Following Nancy Dinh's testimony, a tire tread expert remotely testified, stating that the tire tracks found at both crime scenes could not have been made by the Schweitzer brothers' Volkswagen. In his opinion, the tracks were likely left by a larger vehicle, such as a truck, SUV, or van. The final witness to testify was dentist Adam Freeman. Dana Ireland had what appeared to be a human bite mark on her left breast, according to the prosecutor's initial assessment. However, forensic expert Freeman disputed this claim, stating it was not a bite mark. This case highlights the flaws in forensic science, particularly in the analysis of bite marks, Freeman testified. After the witnesses finished testifying, District Court Judge Peter Kubota delivered his verdict. He stated that the new DNA evidence, along with the tire tread evidence, the disputed bite mark evidence, and Sean Schweitzer's recantation, collectively proved that a jury in a new trial would likely find Albert Ian Schweitzer not guilty. Therefore, Kubota declared the conviction vacated and ordered Mr. Albert Ian Schweitzer's immediate release from custody. With these words, spoken 23 years after Albert Ian Schweitzer's guilty verdict and 25 years after his arrest, Albert Ian was suddenly exonerated and freed. Judge Kubota then addressed Albert Ian Schweitzer with heartfelt words. With 1/3 of his life still ahead of him, the judge offered a choice: to live in anger and resentment towards the process and the people who had wronged him, or to find a new sense of freedom. Kubota suggested that Albert Ian make the most of this opportunity, surrounded by his family, who had come to support him. Freed from his handcuffs, Albert Ian hugged his lawyers and then his family members, including some he had not seen in decades. His mother was overcome with emotion in his arms. Albert Ian's young son, who had grown up without his father, was also in the courtroom and shared a hug with him. His younger brother, Sean, was there too, with a warm smile and open arms. As a result of Albert Ian's acquittal, his brother Sean's lawyer is now seeking to have his own criminal record cleared. The story serves as a reminder of the tragic fate of Frank Pauline, who died in prison in New Mexico in 2015. Pauline was attacked by a fellow inmate, Daniel Hood, who was serving time for taking 2 lives. On April 27, 2015, who'd attacked Pauline in the recreation yard at the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility, striking him 3 times on the back of the head with a rock. The motive behind the attack was Hood's belief that Pauline was a snitch. Despite efforts by the medical staff, Pauline could not be saved. In response, his family's lawyer plans to file a petition for his posthumous rehabilitation. Albert Ian Schweitzer finds the transition from prison life to freedom extremely difficult. He shares that adjusting to life outside of prison has been more challenging than he anticipated. Most days are a struggle with anxiety. While Albert Ian may be eligible for compensation for wrongful imprisonment, which could award him $50,000 for each year spent in prison, the process is not straightforward. His lawyers are working diligently to ensure he receives the compensation he is owed. The Dana Ireland case remains unsolved 3 decades later, but investigators are hopeful that advances in DNA testing and genealogy will help them identify the person responsible for destroying the Dana family's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Roberson. Bianca Roberson, born on October 17, 1998, Bianca grew up to be a remarkable individual. She excelled at Bayard Rustin High School, earning straight A's and graduating with honors. Her impressive academic record earned her a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University in Florida, where she planned to major in criminal justice and pursue her dream of becoming an FBI forensic agent. Bianca was a multi-talented young woman who had been involved in various activities throughout her life. She was a Girl Scout, a cheerleader, and a basketball player. She also had a passion for music, taking lessons in flute, violin, clarinet, and guitar. Additionally, she was an artist. Bianca lived with her mother and maternal grandmother, Josephine Perry, and was excited to experience the independence and challenges of dorm life. However, her plans were tragically cut short. On June 28, 2017, Bianca, her mother, and grandmother went shopping at Walmart to prepare for her upcoming move to Florida. Bianca Roberson was tragically killed in a car accident on a road she knew well. The incident occurred just 10 minutes after she left a Walmart parking lot. Witnesses quickly called 911, and first responders rushed to the scene. Unfortunately, paramedics were unable to save Bianca, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial observations suggested that Bianca's severe head injuries were caused by her car veering off the road. However, as police interviewed eyewitnesses, a crucial detail emerged. A witness reported that Bianca's car had collided with a red pickup truck, which had fled the scene without stopping. As she drove home to meet her granddaughter, Bianca's grandmother was worried about the traffic and wondered if it might be related to Bianca. However, she had no idea that the cause of the traffic jam was actually a car crash involving Bianca. When she arrived home, she was met with devastating news. 2 police officers were waiting to inform her that Bianca had been killed in the accident. For Michelle, Bianca's mother, the news was almost too much to bear. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Michelle, a nurse from Delaware County, was still grieving the loss of her 22-year-old son, ML James Rowley, who had passed away from a heart condition in 2013. She had hoped that time would ease her pain, but instead, it had only intensified with the loss of her daughter. Michelle Robertson is struggling to cope with the loss of her second child. "I'm just existing," she said, feeling lost and without purpose. Her children were her reason for getting up in the morning, and now she feels like a mom without kids. After her divorce from Rodney Robertson in 2006, they managed to put aside their differences and work together as amicable co-parents thanks to their daughter Bianca. Michelle acknowledged that their divorce was not easy, but Bianca's presence helped to calm the tension. "Bianca didn't like it when I spoke harshly to her mother, and she would correct me," he said. Bianca's love for her family, especially her father, brought them closer together. Rodney admitted that Bianca was his favorite, and her devotion to family was inspiring. Bianca's father proudly said that his daughter was one step closer to achieving her dream of becoming an FBI forensic specialist. Bianca was excited to be on her own, but her future career was her main focus. Her hard work had paid off, as she had received a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University, one of the 3 schools that had accepted her out of the 4 she had applied to. Bianca's father said she had also been accepted to Coastal Carolina and the University of Georgia. Investigators were seeking CCTV footage to confirm the initial belief that Bianca's car veered off the road after colliding with a red pickup truck. If this were the case, it would imply that Bianca's death was no accident, but rather a deliberate act that required the police to identify a perpetrator. However, the truth revealed during the investigation proved even more stunning. While awaiting the CCTV footage, a significant development in the case occurred. It was initially assumed that Bianca's death resulted from her car crashing and hitting her head. Yet, during the autopsy, forensic experts made a startling discovery: there was a bullet in Bianca's head. This revelation drastically altered the course of the investigation. What initially seemed like an accident and later a collision with a red pickup truck was revealed to be a death caused by a gunshot wound to the head. The autopsy report's findings prompted detectives to meet with Bianca's family, bringing devastating news that her death was no accident. This revelation sent shockwaves, especially for her mother, Michelle, who couldn't fathom why anyone would harm her daughter. Bianca had a close-knit relationship with those around her, and her family couldn't identify anyone who might have wished her harm. Desperate for answers, the Robertson family relied on investigators to identify the person responsible for Bianca's tragic death. Upon reviewing the security footage from the Walmart her family visited on the day of her death, detectives found no suspicious activity. The detectives closely examined the family's actions from the moment they left their cars to the time they departed the parking lot. They dismissed the possibility that someone from Walmart could have followed Bianca and shot her, as she had not argued with anyone during their visit. The family had simply shopped, loaded their purchases into Bianca's car, and left. The investigation suggested that the motive for Bianca's death might be linked to an incident that occurred while she was driving home on the highway. Bianca's mother recalled, "We packed all the bags into Bianca's car," referring to the 2009 Chevy Malibu they had purchased for her 16th birthday from CarMax. Michelle recalled that her mother had chosen the car Bianca was driving when she first got her permit. According to Michelle, Bianca's mother said that Bianca had gotten everything she wanted, but Michelle didn't think of her as spoiled. Instead, she believed Bianca was simply loved and also willing to work for the things she desired. In fact, Bianca started her first job at McDonald's when she was 15 and soon switched to a dietary aide position at the Whitehorse Village Retirement Community in Delaware County. Michelle remembered that she had received a large number of letters and cards from the residents at Whitehorse Village who adored Bianca. After the police obtained traffic footage from CCTV cameras, Michelle pointed out that there were no cameras at the exact location where Bianca veered off the road. However, there was a camera about a mile away. To help illustrate the location, Michelle suggested looking at Google Maps. According to the map, Bianca lost control of her car where 2 lanes merged into one. When investigators reviewed the recording, they found evidence that supported the account of Bianca's encounter with the driver of the red pickup truck. The footage showed their cars traveling side by side, approaching a point where their lanes merged into one. It's possible that the conflict began when one driver failed to yield to the other. Given the tragic outcome, investigators inferred that the driver of the red pickup truck might have been the one who fired the shot. However, the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read the pickup truck's license plates or see the driver's face. Nevertheless, from that point on, the driver of the pickup truck became the primary suspect in Bianca Roberson's death. Detectives were tasked with identifying the man, but they only had a blurry image to work with. After inquiring with Bianca's family members, it became clear that none of them knew anyone who owned a red pickup truck. The police then re-interviewed the witnesses who were present at the scene and those who had called 911, but unfortunately, none of them had caught a glimpse of the vehicle's license plate. The Bianca Roberson family has received an outpouring of support from friends, strangers, and people of all ages since Bianca's passing. A vigil was held just 2 days after her death, and many have reached out to share their stories and condolences. Bianca's family describes her as a selfless and compassionate person who always put the needs of others before her own. According to her mother, Michelle, Bianca would often take in children who were in need, even if it meant sneaking them into their home without permission. When confronted about her actions, Bianca would simply say that she wanted to help others in the same way she would want someone to help her if she were in a similar situation. This kind of empathy and kindness was evident in many aspects of Bianca's life, including the time she witnessed a car accident and immediately asked her mother if they could stop to help. A kind-hearted woman's first instinct was to invite those eating alone to join her family for dinner. In the aftermath of Bianca's car accident, investigators analyzed footage from distant cameras to determine the direction of the red pickup truck involved in the incident. To gather more details about the truck, including its brand, model, and license plate, they required higher quality footage. The police sought the public's assistance through the media, asking anyone with information about the truck to come forward. Following the accident, the pickup truck turned towards Poi Pike. To find evidence, detectives visited nearby houses and shops, searching for cameras that might have captured the truck. After an extensive search, they found a camera with good quality footage, taken around 5 minutes after witnesses called 911 to report Bianca's car accident. Upon analyzing this footage, detectives saw the red pickup truck driving by shortly after the incident. The investigation continued, but the license plate of the suspect's car remained unknown, and it was unclear if the car in the footage was the same one or just a similar vehicle. However, 2 days after the incident, a new lead emerged when a woman contacted the police, claiming to have seen the car they were searching for. She also reported seeing the driver's face. She described the car as a red pickup truck that overtook her, stopped at the Poi Pike intersection, and then turned left. This information was crucial in narrowing down the search area and also revealed that the pickup truck in the footage was not the actual suspect's vehicle, but rather a similar-looking truck. Her description helped a forensic artist create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white male, 25 to 35 years old, with brown hair and a stubble beard. The police released the suspect's sketch, hoping someone would recognize the person and come forward. They showed the sketch to Bianca's family, but no one recognized the individual. As the investigation continued, detectives began to consider the possibility that Bianca's death was a hate crime. To gather more evidence, the police canvassed the area where the red pickup truck was last seen, visiting homes and businesses near the intersection where it turned left. They were searching for a high-quality surveillance recording that could provide answers to their questions. Their efforts paid off when a homeowner, who lived less than half a mile from the intersection, provided the police with a recording from their driveway surveillance camera. By estimating the time it would take to drive from the crime scene to the homeowner's location, the police quickly found the relevant footage. Although the new footage was of better quality than the previous one, its angle made it impossible for the police to identify the car or its driver. The police worked hard to find another recording from a closer camera, and they got lucky. Although the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify some unique features of the car. These features included a sticker on the right side window, a vertical dent on the passenger door, and damage to the hood. With these details, the police had a much better chance of finding the car. The police sought the public's help in finding the truck and its driver by offering a $5,000 reward for any information that could aid in the investigation. They were confident that someone would recognize the distinctive vehicle. 3 days after Bianca Roberson's death, a lawyer contacted the police station on behalf of a client who wanted to turn himself in, stating that his client was connected to the incident that resulted in Bianca's death. The incident occurred on a recent Wednesday at approximately 5:30 p.m. Bianca Roberson, an 18-year-old who had just graduated from Westchester Ruston High School, was driving on Route 100, a two-lane highway, on her way to Jacksonville University. Her life was full of promise, with a loving family and a bright future ahead. As she approached the merge with Route 202, the road narrowed from 2 lanes to 1. A common merge on a southeastern Pennsylvania highway turned deadly last Wednesday when a dispute over positioning escalated into violence. Bianca Roberson was merging from 2 lanes to 1 when a man in a red pickup truck, also merging, became agitated and shot her in the head. The suspect, 28-year-old David Desper of Pennsylvania, surrendered to police with his lawyer. Although he refused to testify, he consented to a search of his home and revealed the location of his pickup truck. David was subsequently arrested and charged with Bianca Roberson's murder. The police tracked down the suspect's vehicle, a pickup truck, at a location David had previously mentioned. Unique features on the truck, such as stickers on the windows and damage to the body, made it unmistakably clear that it was the same truck involved in the crime. The investigators searched Davider's residence and found the firearm that was used to shoot and kill Bianca Roberson. Despite this major breakthrough in the case, the authorities remained baffled as to the killer's motivation. Over 800 loved ones and members of the community attended a heart-wrenching farewell ceremony at the St. Paul's Baptist Church in the suburban Westchester borough, which lies approximately 25 miles. During the funeral service, many people paid tribute to she, including her brothers, officials from her high school, the chief admissions officer from the university she was set to attend, and friends. In his eulogy, Pastor Wayne Croft Sr. drew a comparison between the shooter and 2 other infamous cases: George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon Martin, a black teenager, in Florida in 2012, and was acquitted of murder in 2013, and Michael Dunn, who shot and killed Jordan Davis, another black teenager, in Florida in 2012, after a dispute over music. Dunn was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. The pastor expressed the sentiment of the black community, stating that regardless of whether Bianca's murder was a result of road rage or racism, the fact remains that a brilliant young black woman's life was lost. During the trial in September 2018, David Desper was asked to explain his motive for committing the crime. Instead of providing an answer, he requested forgiveness from Bianca's family. For Bianca's parents, the thought of facing their daughter's alleged killer was daunting. To show their support and unity, Rodney had arranged for family members and friends to wear T-shirts with Bianca's face on the front as they gathered at the Chester County Government Services Center. The family of Bianca Roberson wore bracelets with a poignant message: Bianca Roberson, a rose in God's garden. They also held a banner that read, "Justice for Bianca Nicole Roberson," a reminder of the tragic event that took her life on June 28, 2017. Rodney, Bianca's father, expressed his uncertainty about how he would react when he saw the man responsible for his daughter's murder. "I don't know what I'll do when I see him," he said. "The man who held the gun that took my daughter's life, he just took her dreams away. He had no right to do that." Michelle, Bianca's mother, struggled to come to terms with the loss of her child. "I want to hold her, comfort her, and bring her back," she said through tears. The prosecutor argued that the traffic conflict occurred because Bianca failed to yield when the lanes merged into one. In response, David Desper rolled down the passenger side window and fired a shot. Realizing the severity of his actions, David Desper fled the scene, leaving his pickup truck with a friend in Pennsylvania, and attempted to escape to Delaware. However, after his sketch and the distinctive features of his pickup truck were publicized in the news, David Desper decided to hire a lawyer and surrender. The police investigated his social media accounts and interviewed his friends but found no evidence to suggest that the crime was motivated by bias. As a result, David Desper was not charged with a hate crime. District Attorney Hogan stated that there was no indication that the crime was racially motivated or a hate crime. However, many people disagreed with this assessment. Before the sentencing, the defense portrayed David Desper as harmless and immature for his age, describing him as a big kid who enjoyed playing with cars in his free time. They argued that David Desper had essentially handed the case to the government by turning himself in. The defense claimed that David Desper was driving home when another car startled him, causing him to fire the gun. They maintained that David Desper was not a menacing individual. Prosecutor Chris Miller countered that a 28-year-old man driving with a loaded firearm is not a big kid. He emphasized that David Desper's actions were those of a responsible adult. Ironically, David Desper's own mother had shared a Facebook post about the police searching for the person who murdered Bianca Roberson, unaware that the suspect was her own son. Wendy Desper expressed her love for Bianca's family and apologized for her son's actions. "I'm so sorry for what my son did," she said, as her son wept. Rodney Robertson struggled to speak through tears as he addressed his daughter's killer. "I have simple questions for the defendant," he said. "Why did you shoot my daughter? Was it because of her youth, her race, her gender, or just because you wanted to go first on the road? Was it simply because you were having a bad day?" Rodney continued, "All my dreams for Bianca were coming true until the day the defendant took her life. Now, all I have left of Bianca are my memories." David Desper pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft became emotional as she announced the sentence, telling Desper, "I don't believe you were afraid, I believe it was anger." County Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft imposed the maximum sentence of 20 to 40 years for that grade of homicide. David Desper attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeal was denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney. This story began in 2016 in the Argentine city of Mendoza. On January 10th, two young women, 21-year-old Marina Menegazzo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney, embarked on a highly anticipated trip. Unfortunately, their journey ultimately led to one of the most publicized investigations in Latin America over the past decade. At the time, Maria Jose was a 22-year-old economics student at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina was a 21-year-old speech therapy student at the Aconcagua University. Both women volunteered for an organization that assisted homeless individuals. According to friends and acquaintances, they were two bright and cheerful young women who were extremely close to their families. Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney embarked on a trip with two friends, but the group eventually parted ways. They girls continued their journey, which began on January 10th. Their route can be tracked through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts. On January 13th, they were in Cusco, Peru, an ancient city that was once the capital of the Inca Empire. The next day, January 14th, another photo was posted, also taken in Cusco. A subsequent image was published on January 15th, showing they on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric power plant. Machu Picchu is a famous ancient Inca city, often referred to as the City Above the Clouds, and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo had about 10 days of vacation left and were in no rush to return home. They decided to revisit Montañita, the town in Ecuador where their trip had begun. On February 22nd, Maria Jose Coney posted a photo of herself with Marina Menegazzo on Instagram, which would be her last post. On the same day, they contacted their families in Argentina to let them know they would be returning soon. They planned to take a bus from Ecuador to Lima, Peru, where they would spend the night at a friend's house. From Lima, they would fly to Santiago, Chile on February 25th, and then take a bus to their hometown of Mendoza, Argentina. They informed their relatives that they would be unreachable by phone for a few days due to poor signal reception. However, when their relatives tried to contact them, they were unable to get in touch. As the days passed, there was no activity on Maria Jose Coni and Marina Manazzo's social media accounts, causing their relatives to become increasingly worried. Marina Manazzo's sister took to social media to raise awareness about their disappearance. She posted a photo of they girls with a message stating that they had gone missing on Monday, the 22nd, in Montevideo, Ecuador, and asked people to share the information. The families were eager to know if they had left the country and boarded a flight, but their attempts to contact the airline were met with no response. The family of Maria Jose Coni and Marina Manazzo tried to get information from they were supposed to stay with before leaving, but they claimed they never showed up. The family then reported they missing to the emergency services in Ecuador and also contacted the Argentine consulate for assistance. The Argentine consulate got involved on February 27th and sent the fingerprints to Ecuador. This was done because a few days earlier, on February 25th, an unidentified woman's body was found in Montevideo and taken to Guayaquil. The authorities compared the fingerprints from Argentina with those of the unidentified body and confirmed that the body was that of Maria Jose Coni. On Saturday, February 27th, police investigated the area where Maria Jose Coni's body was discovered and found the body of Marina Manazzo just 43 yards away. Like Marina Manazzo's body, Maria Jose Coni's was also wrapped in a plastic bag and duct tape. According to the Ecuadorian police, the killer attempted to conceal Marina Manazzo's body by placing an object on top of it, which initially prevented its discovery. During the autopsy, the medical expert determined that Maria Jose Coni's death was caused by severe blunt force trauma to the head. Her injuries also included a broken leg, a broken toe, and what authorities described as genital injuries. Additionally, markings on her wrist suggested that she had been restrained. Marina Manazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck and had similar wrist markings, indicating that she had also been tied up. Their deaths occurred on February 23rd. Toxicology tests revealed that their blood contained a high amount of a psychiatric medication. Based on the circumstances of their deaths, police believed that they had not taken the medication voluntarily and may not have even known they had ingested it. It is likely that someone had mixed the medication into their food or drinks without their knowledge. A breakthrough in the case came just 24 hours after the discovery of the second body. The President and Interior Minister of Ecuador announced that the police had made an arrest, sparking mixed emotions among the victims' families. Alberto Segundo Mina Pon, 33, and Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, 39, were taken into custody and quickly confessed to the crime, revealing the events that had transpired. Physical evidence found at the home of one of the suspects, Mina Pon, included bloodstains. The police also recovered Marina's phone, backpack, and other belongings near the house. The rapid arrest and immediate confession of they men were met with skepticism by those following the case, leaving many with unanswered questions. Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, José Serrano, claimed that they checked out of their hotel room on February 22nd at 2 p.m. According to the men's story, they had their money stolen at the hotel, prompting them to hitchhike to Lima. However, the hotel owner disputed this claim, stating that there was no evidence of theft. Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coni's families found this explanation hard to believe, particularly since they had credit cards that they could have used if they encountered financial difficulties. The lack of activity on the credit cards suggested that either someone stole both the cash and cards or that the men's story was not true. Moreover, they could have accessed the funds in their account without needing the physical card, but they didn't use the money to book travel or accommodations online. According to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones entered a bar and requested 2 glasses of water because they were thirsty and had no money. The bar owner corroborated this account, stating that she provided them with water due to their financial situation. However, it remains unclear whether the money was actually stolen. The minister continued by referencing the testimony of the suspects, who had already confessed to their guilt. One of the suspects, Pon, stated that around 8 p.m. on that day, Rodriguez informed him about 2 Argentinian girls in a bar. Pon and Rodriguez approached they and started a conversation, during which Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones explained that they were hitchhiking to Lima because they lacked the funds for a bus ticket. This version of events raises several questions. They had purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago, Chile, which is over 1,000 miles away. It seems illogical that they would try to save money by hitchhiking and risk missing their flight, which was scheduled for February 25th. This conversation with Pon allegedly took place on the evening of February 22nd, making their decision even more puzzling. However, local police found witnesses who corroborated this unusual story. Since Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones had no money for a hotel or hostel and needed a place to stay for the night, Pon offered to let them stay at his house. They accepted his offer. A taxi driver was found who confirmed that he drove Marina Manazzo, Maria Jose Cones, and Pon to Pon's home. This picture is of the house where Pon resided. After that, Pon returned to the bar with Rodriguez, as reported by Ecuadorian authorities, and continued drinking. Meanwhile, Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones were left alone in the house. The intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones were no longer there. The police investigation revealed that Marina Manazzo va Maria Jose Cones had visited a nearby store to purchase soda before returning to the house. A store cashier confirmed this, indicating that Marina Manazzo va Maria Jose Cones still had some money on them. According to Pon's account, when they returned to the house, he stayed in one room with Maria Jose Cones, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Manazzo. Pon admitted that he attempted to persuade Maria Jose Cones into a romantic encounter, but she resisted and tried to leave. In a fit of rage, Pon grabbed a stick and struck Maria Jose Cones on the head, killing her instantly. At the same time, he heard a scream coming from the other room. Upon entering the room, he found that Rodriguez had also taken Marina Manazzo's life. Rodriguez immediately fled the scene, leaving Pon to contemplate how to dispose of the bodies. Pon attempted to erase all evidence from the house by wrapping the bodies in plastic bags and duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported the bodies to a wasteland near the ocean shore, approximately 440 yards from his home. It is essential to note that this account is the official version provided by the Ecuadorian authorities. However, this narrative leaves several questions unanswered, including the origin of the marks on her wrists and the presence of a potent drug in the blood of both girls, as revealed by toxicological analysis. Her family questioned the Ecuadorian authorities' account due to numerous inconsistencies in the case. They suspected a possible connection to human trafficking and believed the authorities might be protecting someone. The family's doubts were fueled by several factors. They had run out of money but did not use their credit cards, suggesting that they may have been coerced or deceived. Additionally, it was reported that they were under the influence of drugs, which raised suspicions about their supposed activities. Notably, the only people who claimed to have seen Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Cones on the day of their disappearance were a select few who corroborated the authorities' version, including the owner of the bar, a taxi driver, and a cashier who allegedly sold soda to one of they. Furthermore, the town's relatively small population of 5,000 residents made it surprising that no one else came forward as a witness. The families of the victims were confused by several aspects of the case. They couldn't understand why the bodies were found 2 days apart, despite being only 43 yards away from each other. It also seemed strange that Marina Manatsova Maria Jose Coney had sought help from Pon and Rodriguez, rather than approaching one of the many Argentine tourists in the area. The brother of one of the victims reported seeing used syringes on the floor when he was taken to the crime scene by the Ecuadorian police. However, when he asked about them, the syringes mysteriously disappeared. Furthermore, the syringes were not visible in crime scene photos, and the experts who examined the area denied their existence. The family suspected that Pon and Rodriguez were involved in something more sinister, such as human trafficking, and that they were being used as a cover. The authorities responded by scheduling a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. Additionally, it was discovered that both defendants had repeatedly changed their story about the events surrounding Marina Manatso and Maria Jose Coney deaths. According to one version, Pon denied involvement in the crime and instead claimed that the perpetrator was a Venezuelan illegal substance dealer known as El Chamo, who lived in the area. However, when questioned by the police, El Chamo denied any involvement and offered to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample to prove his innocence. The crime scene yielded several DNA samples, including those from Pon and the deceased girls, as well as some unidentified samples. Further testing revealed that the unidentified samples did not match Rodriguez, who was suspected of being Pon's accomplice, nor El Chamo, who was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. A second autopsy, conducted by Argentine experts, revealed that the girls were in a state of vulnerability and unable to defend themselves before their deaths. The autopsy also confirmed that they were subjected to forced intimacy before being killed. The autopsy revealed additional details, including that Maria Jose Coney had bruises and scratches only on one side of her body, suggesting she may have been ejected from a moving vehicle. Furthermore, a new toxicological analysis confirmed that both girls had been given a potent psychiatric medication that can impair a person's willpower. A disturbing reaction swept across Latin America following the incident. Unfortunately, the public's response often blamed the victims, and in this case, they were held responsible for their own deaths. Not only were they criticized by ordinary internet users, but also by well-known public figures. During the same time, Berlin hosted a tourism fair, where Rira gave an interview to a German news agency. Her comments were alarming, as she stated that the deaths were inevitable, given the way they traveled. She also revealed that she had never visited Montanita, a popular tourist destination, because it didn't match her social status. These comments were essentially victim-blaming at the state level, which is a sad and concerning fact. Following an interview with Riva Dera, the Ecuadorian government issued an apology to the families of Marina Manatso and Maria Jose Coney, and one woman was fired. Among those heavily criticized was Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narton, who described they as favorable victims and implied that they provoked others to commit crimes. However, after intense backlash, Dr. Narton claimed he had been misunderstood and emphasized that he never intended to excuse or absolve criminals of their responsibilities. A Paraguayan student, Guadalupe Aosta, wrote a Facebook post in response to online comments that blamed Marina Manatso and Maria Jose Coney for their tragic fate. The post went viral, receiving over 700,000 reposts in the first week. It began with the haunting words, "Yesterday, I was killed." The post went on to describe the violent events. "I refused to be touched, and they smashed my skull open with a stick, leaving me broken. They put me in a black plastic bag, sealed with duct tape, and threw me on the beach, where I was later found a few hours later. The aftermath of my death was more devastating than the act itself. When my body was found, no one bothered to investigate who had taken my life. Instead, I was bombarded with irrelevant and insensitive questions. What was I wearing? Why was I alone? Why did I, a woman, dare to travel by myself? I was in a high-risk area, so what did I expect? The authorities even had the audacity to suggest to my parents that I must have done something wrong, that I must have broken some rule. In death, I realized that I was not considered equal to a man. My demise was somehow my fault, and that's the narrative that would be perpetuated. But if the headlines had read, "Two young men found dead," the public would have been outraged, demanding justice and severe punishment for the perpetrators. The response would have been vastly different if I were a man. I'm speaking out for myself and for all the women who have been silenced, marginalized, and oppressed. I'm speaking out for every woman who has had her dreams crushed and her life destroyed. I urge you to raise your voice, to fight for justice and equality. I'll be with you in spirit, and I promise that one day, there will be so many of us standing together that our voices cannot be silenced. The trial started on August 8, 2016, but was marred by several setbacks. The prosecutor changed 3 times, causing significant delays in the process. Despite these challenges, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of evidence, including witness statements and over 200 physical items collected from the crime scene. The police had found some of the victim's personal belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the house where the crime took place and in the surrounding area. During the trial, Pon maintained his innocence, claiming that his earlier confession was made under police pressure. This statement only reinforced the suspicions of the victims' families that the Ecuadorian authorities were withholding information. Meanwhile, Rodriguez altered his testimony, suggesting that Colombian dealers of illicit substances were involved in the deaths. In the trial's first week, the prosecutor revealed that he suspected additional individuals were involved in the case. This suspicion was based on the discovery of 3 more male DNA samples at the crime scene, in addition to the DNA of Rodriguez and Pon. Ultimately, the court found both Pon and Rodriguez guilty, sentencing them to 40 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed under Ecuadorian law. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities arrested José Luis Pérez Castro, a 34-year-old man, after finding his DNA at the crime scene. Castro's defense team claimed that he had lived in the house a few weeks prior to the incident and that his DNA was present due to a dental infection. They alleged that he had spat blood onto the wall as a result of this infection. However, the defense's explanation for the presence of Castro's DNA on the victims' bodies was that he must have touched an object or piece of furniture that the police had also handled, thereby transferring his DNA. This argument began to fall apart when a dentist testified in court. It was revealed that Castro had contacted the dentist 2 weeks after the bodies of Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney were discovered, asking for a note to confirm his alleged dental infection. The dentist refused to provide the note, as he found no evidence of any health issues during his examination of Castro. A man was ejected from a dentist's office after seeking a medical certificate. The dentist refused to issue one, explaining that there needed to be an underlying medical condition causing pain, which he didn't observe. This denial dismantled his defense. Meanwhile, while awaiting trial, Castro broke prison rules by posting on social media about his situation. In a statement, he expressed confidence that God would ultimately prove his innocence. Despite his persistent claims of innocence, Castro was ultimately found guilty and received a 40-year prison sentence, just like 2 others, Alberto Pon and Eduardo Rodriguez. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together, according to those who knew them. Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding two lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene, where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes, as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found: a white Honda parked on the lake's shore, with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident, even to a non-expert: both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident, and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detectives' attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence, including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4 9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. A visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible, as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father, simultaneously an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrews sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his coworkers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect, but promised to find him and talk to him. Later that day, John was able to reach Andrew by phone. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son, Andrew, revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them, you're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself in to the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years, and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Monroe County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew, Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ollie Kemp. Alexandra Ollie Elizabeth Kemp was born October 11, 1982, in Leawood. She was the oldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. After graduating high school with honors, Alexandra enrolled at Kansas State University. Following her freshman year, she returned to her hometown of Leawood for summer break. During her break, Alexandra took a part-time job at a local outdoor swimming pool near her parents' house, where her younger brother Tyler already worked. The pool was a quiet neighborhood spot, catering mainly to local residents, and it still operates today. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra reported to work on an overcast day because resulted in fewer visitors than usual. At 5 p.m., Tyler arrived at the pool to start his shift, but his sister Alexandra was nowhere to be found. Her phone and purse were still on the table where she usually sat, which made Tyler confused and worried. He immediately called his parents to report that Alexandra had vanished. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene and began searching for his daughter. He first checked the pool, but it was empty. Next, he went to the small pump room near the pool, which contained equipment for water purification, a ladder, and other items. Upon entering the pump room, Roger didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. However, he soon noticed a leg protruding from under a tarp. As he lifted the tarp, he was met with a horrific sight: his daughter Alexandra, brutally beaten and naked from the waist down, with multiple bruises on her face and body. Roger quickly called 911 and spoke with the operator. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. The paramedics took Alexandra to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, she sadly did not survive. Alexandra was declared dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. An examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, despite the presence of multiple severe injuries. A thorough investigation found no evidence of forced intimacy, although her body was partially unclothed. The police collected DNA samples from Alexandra's body and secured the pool area, searching for clues to identify the perpetrator. Evidence of a struggle was evident in the room where Roger discovered Alexandra's body, including her flip-flops found in separate locations. Additionally, an open bottle of antiseptic gel and its cap were found at the scene. A few days later, while the police continued to investigate, Alexandra's family and hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects at a funeral ceremony. Phil Howes, Alexandra's boyfriend since high school, was initially suspected in her death. As a pool administrator, he worked the morning shift on the day of her death, and Alexandra arrived at noon to start her 5-hour shift. Although Phil often stayed after work to spend time with Alexandra, he left promptly after his shift that day because they had plans for the evening. Despite being an early suspect, Phil had a solid alibi and was quickly cleared by the police. In an interview with detectives, Phil mentioned that Alexandra often felt uncomfortable being alone at work because some of the lawn maintenance workers would stare at her and try to flirt. The police investigated the lawn workers, but each of them had an alibi. However, the inquiry wasn't entirely fruitless. Several workers reported seeing a suspicious man with a video camera lurking in the bushes near the pool the day before Alexandra's death, apparently watching the female lifeguards in swimsuits. The police were given conflicting reports about Alexandra's final hours. Some people said she left the scene in an old Ford pickup truck, while others mentioned different circumstances. A study of Alexandra's mobile phone activity revealed that she had made plans with a friend, Laurel, to meet on the day she died. However, Alexandra didn't show up. When Laurel went to the police station to give her account of events, she explained that Alexandra had asked her to come to the pool to keep her company until her shift ended. According to Laurel, the pool was empty that day due to the poor weather, which made Alexandra anxious. When Laurel arrived at the pool at around 2:30 p.m., she didn't see Alexandra anywhere. Instead, a man she didn't know emerged from the pool house and waved at her with a smile. Laurel thought this man might be Alexandra's boss, and she decided to leave so as not to get her friend in trouble for socializing during work hours. At the time, she had no reason to think that anything was amiss. The police investigation led them away from Alexandra's workplace and to a completely different suspect. As a witness, Laurel provided a detailed description of the person she believed committed the crime. The police used this description to create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white man around 30 years old, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a 1980 Ford pickup truck. The suspect's identity was narrowed down when someone recognized the description as matching James Strader, a local mechanic who owned an old Ford pickup truck. James was questioned by the police and appeared to match the sketch, but he denied any involvement in Alexandra's death. His employer verified his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day of the murder. As a result, James was released from custody. While the police had eliminated James as a suspect, forensic analysis of evidence collected from the crime scene revealed male DNA on an antiseptic gel tube and on Alexandra's body. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the police database, leaving the case still unsolved. Alexandra's family, friends, and boyfriend were ruled out as suspects after DNA tests showed no match with the DNA samples found on her body. The investigation was driven by Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, who was determined to find his daughter's killer. After losing his child, Roger felt like he had lost his purpose in life. However, he found a new reason to keep going: justice for Alexandra. In an interview, Roger explained his approach: "You can either give up or keep fighting. I chose to fight." Impressed by his dedication, the police department gave Roger a workspace where he could collect and share information, and collaborate with the investigators. As they explored all available leads, Roger and the investigators contacted the popular TV show America's Most Wanted and asked them to feature Alexandra's case. The show's producers agreed, and her story was aired. The episode generated hundreds of calls from viewers with potential tips. Although the authorities thoroughly investigated each lead, none of them led to a breakthrough, and the case stalled once again. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, a promising new lead emerged. Following a thorough investigation, police in Utah apprehended a suspect. 3 separate witnesses, including 2 women and a 14-year-old girl, came forward to report being forced into intimate encounters with a man. He had managed to evade capture initially, but was eventually tracked down and arrested in Utah. The arrested individual was identified as James Strader, the same person who had been questioned by Kansas police earlier. Notably, James bore a strong physical resemblance to the suspect's composite sketch. James was questioned by the police, but they failed to collect his DNA sample at the time. This might have been because his employer had convinced the police that James was at work on the day of the crime and had not left the premises. Despite this, James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. Although he resembled the suspect in the composite sketch, James claimed he had not been near the pool on the day of the crime. He eventually provided a DNA sample for analysis. The results indicates that his DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body or the antiseptic gel tube. James was later imprisoned for unrelated charges, and the investigation into Alexandra Kemp's death hit a dead end once again. A year after Alexandra's death, the police still had no leads. Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, and Phil House, her boyfriend, continued to fight for justice. Phil, who was also the president of the student community, sent the composite sketch of the suspect to students at other universities via email and asked them to watch an episode of America's Most Wanted that featured Alexandra Kemp's case. A year had passed, but the police and relatives' efforts had yielded no results in the Alexandra Kemp case. Undeterred, Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, continued his quest for justice. He reached out to the America's Most Wanted program again, requesting a rerun of the episode about Alexandra's death. The show's creators asked if there were any new developments, and although Roger replied that there were none, his determination impressed them, leading to the episode being aired again. The rerun generated a fresh wave of calls to the police, prompting Roger to offer a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person responsible for his daughter's death. The City of Leawood authorities increased the reward to $50,000. Roger also distributed flyers featuring his daughter's photo, a sketch of the suspect, and details about the reward. As Roger drove along the highway, he noticed billboards and realized they could be an effective way to raise awareness about the case. He began contacting advertising agencies to inquire about the cost of posting the information on a billboard. When he called the Lamar Advertising Company, the owner refused to take his money, offering to display the information on multiple billboards for free instead. Roger decided to publicize a sketch of the suspect and reward information on billboards along a major highway. The police received hundreds of tips, which took time to investigate. Notably, multiple tips mentioned the same individual, Teddy Hoover, who owned an old Ford pickup truck and worked in pool maintenance. His appearance matched the suspect's sketch, making it unlikely to be a coincidence. The police launched a search for Teddy Hoover and found his address in Kansas. When they arrived, Teddy answered the door, appearing surprised and nervous. However, this reaction didn't necessarily imply guilt, as many people become nervous when confronted by the police. When questioned about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002, Teddy claimed he couldn't remember, which was understandable given the year time lapse. Teddy denied any involvement in maintaining the pool where Alexandra worked. Nevertheless, the detectives asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule him out as a suspect. Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with a lawyer first. He promised to contact the police after speaking with his attorney. The next day, Teddy's lawyer reached out to the investigators, expressing his client's concerns about his DNA sample being added to a database. Teddy reportedly believed in various conspiracy theories and feared that if he cooperated with the police, they would use the information against him in other cases. In an effort to alleviate his concerns, the investigators promised not to enter his DNA into any database and only use it to compare with the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer agreed to speak with his client and said he would call back. As they waited for the call, the police reviewed the case materials again and stumbled upon a piece of paper in one of the folders with a name that caught their attention. On the day of Alexandra's death, detectives began questioning onlookers who had gathered by the pool, trying to determine if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Interestingly, one of the people they spoke with was Teddy Hoover, who had claimed he had never been to the crime scene before. As the investigation continued, detectives grew increasingly confident that Teddy Hoover might be the man they had been searching for over the past 2 years. After several days, investigators contacted Teddy's lawyer to ask if his client was willing to provide a DNA sample. However, the lawyer responded by stating that his client had refused his services and broken off contact. Police immediately went to Teddy's house, but he had already escaped. As a result, the 29-year-old suspect was placed on the National Wanted list. Despite the efforts of the detectives, Teddy managed to evade capture for months. Billboards featuring his image were still up, but the search had yielded nothing. It wasn't until September 2004, when an anonymous caller contacted the police, that a new lead emerged. According to the caller, he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom Teddy was living in Kansas. Detectives sought to locate Laura Barr, a woman connected to Teddy Hoover, but discovered she had left the state at the same time he escaped. This led them to investigate further. The U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that Laura was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut, along with a man named Benjamin Appleby, at the same address. The house where they resided was secluded and located in a rural area. Authorities suspected that Benjamin Appleby might be an alias for Teddy Hoover. To aid in the investigation, detectives from Leawood contacted the Connecticut State Police, requesting their assistance in locating Benjamin. It was discovered that he had a prior record in Connecticut, with an outstanding arrest warrant stemming from a 1997 incident where he had exposed himself to a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin had evaded capture and fled the state. With the existing warrant, detectives proceeded to the address associated with Benjamin's mail. Upon arrival, they found him at home and immediately took him into custody. As suspected, Benjamin Appleby was confirmed to be Teddy Hoover. It was revealed that while detectives in Kansas had been seeking a DNA sample from Teddy in connection with Alexandra Kemp's death, he had returned to Connecticut and resumed using his real name, attempting to maintain a low profile and escape notice. To apprehend Benjamin, detectives from Leawood traveled to Connecticut, anticipating that he would once again claim innocence. Before bringing him in for questioning, they devised a plan to unsettle him. They filled the interrogation room with crime scene photos and pictures of Alexandra, and placed folders with his name on the table, creating the illusion that the investigation had substantial evidence against him. When Benjamin entered the interrogation room, he was visibly shaken and unable to speak. A detective confronted him, inquiring about the implications of obtaining his DNA sample. Shortly after, Benjamin broke down in tears, confessing to Alexandra's death. He then recounted the events of the fateful June day, explaining that he had noticed Alexandra, found her attractive, and attempted to flirt with her. When she entered the pump room, he followed her, locked the door, and trapped her inside. When Benjamin touched she fought back, leaving him feeling humiliated. In a fit of anger, he attacked her, beating and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Benjamin then attempted to take advantage of her body, undressing her partially. He retrieved a tube of antiseptic gel from a first aid kit, intending to use it as a lubricant. However, just as he was about to proceed, the sound of a car horn distracted him. The victim's friend, who was waiting in a car behind a fence, had noticed something was amiss and sounded the horn. Fearing he would be caught, Benjamin hastily covered the body and fled the scene. Later, Benjamin returned to the area, where he encountered Alexandra's friend, whom he greeted with a smile and a wave, trying to appear nonchalant. He then got into his pickup truck and drove away. Hours later, Benjamin returned to the crime scene again, this time blending in with the crowd of onlookers gathered near the pool. The DNA evidence ultimately led to Benjamin's downfall. Tests revealed that the DNA found on the tube of antiseptic gel and on Alexandra's body matched Benjamin's. Thanks in large part to the efforts of investigator Roger Kemp, the police were finally able to identify the man responsible for Alexandra's murder, more than 2 years after the crime was committed. Benjamin Appleby claimed he initially wanted to plead guilty to avoid putting Alexandra's family through further emotional distress. However, at his first court hearing, he suddenly declared his innocence, stating that his confession was made under duress. Despite this, DNA analysis revealed that his DNA was the only sample found on the victim's body, making it difficult to dispute his involvement. Benjamin's lawyers attempted to argue that their client did not intentionally take Alexandra's life, admitting that he was responsible for her death but claiming it was not premeditated. However, forensic experts pointed out that Benjamin had strangled Alexandra for approximately 10 minutes, during which time he could have stopped but chose not to. The prosecution argued that Benjamin's sole intention was to observe Alexandra. On the day of the incident, June 18, 2002, the pool area was empty due to cloudy weather, allowing Benjamin to take advantage of the situation. He was found guilty by a jury in December 2005 and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, as well as an additional 19 years for attempting to force Alexandra into intimacy. In 2019, Benjamin appealed the decision, but the court upheld the life imprisonment sentence for first-degree murder. The Court of Appeal also ruled that the attempt to force Alexandra into intimacy was already taken into account during the initial sentencing. Benjamin was sentenced twice for the same crime, prompting the court to overturn the second conviction. However, even if Benjamin is released on parole, he will be 81 years old by that time. The authorities involved in the case credit Roger Kemp's persistence for helping them catch the culprit. While Benjamin was in prison, Roger and his wife established a self-defense program for girls, teaching thousands of girls and women across the country basic self-defense techniques. Roger Kemp's tireless efforts to bring attention to the case and his work in creating a safe community did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by Barack Obama at the White House. Until his passing at 77 on March 1, 2022, Roger continued to work for the foundation he established in his daughter's name. His ultimate goal was to make a difference in at least one person's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th, on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m., when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m., when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Aya Hashim. The Hashim family moved to the UK from Lebanon in November 2011, seeking a safer and more promising future. Aya's father, Ismail, wanted his children to have a good education and become valuable member of society. He applied for asylum for himself and his family, and after receiving a residence permit, they settled in Blackburn. Aya was a driven and ambitious young woman with big plans for her life. She was a law student at Salford University. Tragically, her parents' hopes for a better life were shattered when Aya was killed in a senseless act of violence. On May 17, 2020, Aya left her house to go to a nearby supermarket at around 3 p.m. However, she never returned home. About an hour later, Aya's father went out to look for her. Aya's mother searched online and discovered the news that a woman had been shot in their neighborhood. Soon after, Aya's parents received the devastating news that their daughter had been killed in the shooting. Aya was walking on King Street when a car drove by with multiple occupants. One of the individuals in the car fired 2 shots, one of which fatally hit Aya. 19-year-old Aya Hashim was fatally shot on King Street and died the same day despite medical efforts. The police do not think the incident was motivated by racism or religious hatred. Deputy Chief Terry Woods is seeking the public's help in gathering evidence. He asks anyone with dashcam footage or surveillance cameras to come forward if they have recordings of a green Toyota Avensis car or any suspicious activity. According to Deputy Chief Woods, Aya was an innocent bystander who was shopping for her family when she was accidentally caught in the crossfire. The shooting involved a green Toyota Avensis car. Witnesses report that 2 rounds were fired from the vehicle, and sadly, Aya was hit. Later that day, police discovered the Toyota Avensis car involved in the shooting abandoned near the scene of the crime. They also obtained CCTV footage of the incident. The footage shows that at 3:03 p.m. Aya is walking along the sidewalk. The Toyota mentioned earlier drives past her. The rear side window on the left is down. The shooter makes a fatal shot. The bullet goes through her and hits the pole. For ethical reasons, the police did not reveal footage of she falling to the ground. After reviewing the video recording, it's clear that there were at least 2 individuals in the car, the driver and the shooter. Following the shooting, the perpetrators quickly fled the scene and abandoned the vehicle on a nearby street. Within 2 hours, the police located the car and initiated a search for its owner. Aya Hashim was caught in the crossfire of a shooting incident that occurred near Khan's car wash. Following her death, the police launched a massive operation to apprehend the suspects, who had fled the UK, with the assistance of international law enforcement. 8 individuals were initially charged in connection with her death. Aya's death was ultimately determined to be a tragic accident. She was an innocent bystander. The shooting was actually a targeted attack on the owner of Khan's car wash, who was a competitor of Pharaoh Suleiman. It was Suleiman who allegedly hired a hitman to take out Khan, but the bullet mistakenly hit Aya instead. According to the video recording, at the time of the incident, Aya was standing a few feet away from a pole. The first bullet fired missed its intended target and hit something near a man, as evidenced by the splashing water. The key point here is that the shooter made a mistake. The person they aimed at was not the business owner, but rather an employee who was mistaken for Khan. During the second shot, Aya was positioned between the shooter and the employee. The bullet struck her in the left side of her chest, passed through her body, and then hit the pole. The car immediately fled the scene. The car wash owner, Khan, witnessed Aya falling to the ground and rushed to her aid, calling emergency services in the process. He described the events, stating that he had seen the car and the gun, and then the assailant sped away. According to him, they returned and started shooting, aiming the gun at him, which left him confused. To better understand the crime, let's examine the roles of the individuals involved. We'll start with the mastermind, Pharaoh Suleiman. Pharaoh Suleiman was a successful businessman with a loving family. Suleiman owned a thriving tire shop that had gained significant popularity over time. The business provided him with a substantial income, enabling him and his family to live a comfortable life. He was also active on social media, frequently sharing photos of himself driving expensive cars, giving his followers a glimpse into his life. When his business began to decline, he devised a plan to eliminate his competitor, Khan. Despite being a potential suspect due to his motive, Suleiman went ahead with the plan. He enlisted the help of Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. The perpetrators conducted a surveillance mission the day before the crime, driving near the car wash to inspect the area. Additionally, Abu Bakr Saisha purchased the Toyota used in the crime with money provided by Suleiman. Kashif Manzur ensured the car was in working condition by performing technical checks and addressing any malfunctions. Uthman Saisha and his girlfriend, Judy Chapman, played a supporting role in the crime. They drove the shooter and driver to the location of the Toyota in their Ford Fiesta and then picked them up after the crime was committed, they abandoning the Toyota on a nearby street. According to the inquest, at 1:14 p.m., Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha picked up Raja and Ennis from Bolton and drove them 13 miles to Blackburn, where the Toyota was parked. Kashif Manzur made sure the Toyota was ready as all four men drove to Blackburn. However, when they stopped a couple of miles from the car wash, the Toyota wouldn't start due to a dead battery. Manzur jumped the battery using another car's battery and some wires. With the car started, Manzur handed it over to Raja and Ennis, then returned to the service station where Suleiman was waiting, watching from a front row seat to see what would happen. The Toyota approached the corner with its windows rolled down. Ennis and Raja circled the block several times, waiting for the perfect moment to act. They needed to be on the same side of the street as Khan's car wash. Meanwhile, Manzur and Suleiman were observing the situation unfold. On the fourth pass by the car wash, the Toyota slowed down. Coincidentally, Khan was on the street at that exact moment. However, the shooter, Zamir Raja, made a mistake and fired the first shot at a different employee, not Khan. Fortunately, the first bullet missed its target. But the second bullet hit Aya. Following the shooting, Raja and Ennis fled the scene, abandoning their vehicle and getting into a car with Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha, who drove them away from Blackburn. When police reviewed the video of Suleiman's store, Ayaz Hussein entered the store. Suleiman signaled to the others who were aware of the incident to leave the room and go to the second floor. Abu Bakr Saisha, who had bought the Toyota involved in the crime, was sitting behind them. When Abu Bakr Saisha overheard the police radio mention that the perpetrator's car had been found, he immediately got up to discuss something with Suleiman. 9 days after Aya's murder, Zamir Raja, the shooter, fled to Portugal and met Anthony Ennis, the driver of the Toyota, at Lisbon Airport. Both men had escaped the country. Meanwhile, the police were arresting the individuals involved in the crime. Pharaoh Suleiman, the mastermind, was arrested on May 18, the day after Aya's murder. Abu Bakr Saisha was arrested on May 19, and Judy Chapman and Uthman Saisha were arrested on May 20. Ayaz Hussein and Kashif Manzur were arrested on May 21. Zamir Raja, who had hoped to return to England without being detected, was arrested at a London train station on June 6. Anthony Ennis was caught in Spain on July 4 and extradited to the UK. Aya Hashim was murdered and Khan, the owner of a car wash, was nearly killed in a violent crime. Several suspects were charged, and at first, all of them denied any involvement. However, as the investigation continued and the pressure mounted, their stories began to contradict each other as they tried to downplay their roles in the crime. As the suspects' testimonies became more inconsistent, they started to turn on each other, revealing crucial details about the crime to the police. Each suspect tried to avoid a long prison sentence by blaming the others. On August 5, 2021, the court delivered its verdicts, resulting in severe sentences for all those involved. Pharaoh Solon, who had a prior conviction for a fatal hit-and-run incident in 2001, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. Raja, the shooter, was also given a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years. According to reports, he was paid $500 for his involvement in the crime. The driver, Anthony Ennis, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Ayaz Hussein, who orchestrated the crime, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years. Abu Bakr Saisha, who bought the getaway car, will serve at least 28 years. Uthman Satatya, who arranged for the shooter and driver to be transported, will also serve at least 28 years, and Kashif Manzoor, who made sure the car was working on the day of the crime, will serve at least 27 years. The judge was critical of the defendants, stating that they showed no regret for their actions after the shooting. Instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deceive and manipulate their way out of trouble. When that failed, they turned on each other in an attempt to save themselves. Judy Chapman was found guilty in October 2021 of involuntary deprivation of life. She was given a 15-year prison sentence for driving the car involved in the crime. However, investigators have since discovered that other individuals were involved in the crime. This was revealed through analysis of communication between the convicted parties. Louis Otway, a 42-year-old from Manchester, was sentenced to life in prison on May 5, 2023, with a minimum term of 32 years. During his trial, evidence revealed that Otway acted as an intermediary between Ayaz Hussein, Zamir Raja, and Anthony Ennis. Specifically, he assisted Hussein in committing a crime. Another person, Banbridge, was also involved in the case. She was the 10th person to be found guilty. Prosecutors said that Banbridge met with Raja and Ennis in Bolton, took their phones, and turned them off. Then, she drove to Trafford and turned the phones back on in different locations, making it seem like Raja and Ennis were in Greater Manchester, not Blackburn, when a shooting happened. This was done to create a fake alibi for the two men. Banbridge, 32, admitted to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and was sentenced to 23 months in prison on August 11, 2023. This was the last conviction in the case of Aya Hashim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her co-workers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for his shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street, where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at The Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside The Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamada Sif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27th, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the runaway bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie, The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia.